Since 1934, Iowa's farmers have turned to the Iowa Farm Bureau Spokesman as their trusted news source. Now, the Spokesman speaks. Listen in and hear from leading experts on topics important to farmers and agriculture. Now, here's your host.
Welcome to the August 24th edition of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. I'm Andrew Wheeler, and today's episode is going to challenge you to look further into the future. Yes, harvest is just around the corner, but Iowa Farm Bureau's Farmer Education Program Manager is going to explain why you should be looking even further ahead and start planning for post-harvest marketing right now. And while you're probably focused on the day-to-day needs of your operation, the owner of a successful farm-to-table brand is going to help you envision future possibilities for your farm through diversification. We'll start with Ed Kordick, who's Iowa Farm Bureau's Farmer Education Program Manager and one of our go-to guys when it comes to crop marketing answers. Ed shared his post-harvest marketing recommendations with Spokesman editor Dirk Steimel.
We're here with Ed Kordick, Iowa Farm Bureau's Farmer Education Program Manager, to discuss how farmers can determine post-harvest marketing objectives for both corn and soybeans. Ed, it's been a challenging year with limited opportunities to sell crops above the cost of production. What are the factors that Iowa farmers should consider as they set up their marketing plans for crops they are harvesting this fall?
Well, Dirk, you're very right. It was very limited. We look at a chart of, cash prices offered for new crop starting back in January, and all soybeans maybe had about 3 weeks above cost of production, and maybe corn had just a little bit more. But pre-harvest marketing has been very tough. So I've been focused on unpriced crops because I think we're going to put a lot in storage. So it is all about storage strategies. Are you storing for a price appreciation, as in you want price to rise? Or if that's a hedged bushel, we need to be storing for a basis appreciation. You want that basis to get quite a bit stronger. And one of the keys that people need to look at before harvest is, what is the structure of the market? What are the futures prices? What are the cash prices telling me? Is there an incentive to store or not?
Why is it important for farmers to look closely at the cost of ownership as they store their crops on the farm or in commercial storage?
I've been looking at it as a real shift in our emphasis. We need to shift our objectives from pre-harvest being cost of production, but now that these bushels are put into storage, it's cost of ownership. So your goals need to change, in my opinion. So that starting point at harvest, add storage and interest. It's very important to look, like you asked, very important to look at their own cost of ownership as they store those crops. On farm is cheaper than commercial storage, but either way, you can project a break-even line by taking that harvest price and projecting it on out with storage costs, which would be maintenance on a bin, maybe taxes on the bin site, if you're still paying on the bin. And one thing that is often forgotten is cost of ownership, the opportunity cost. Those bushels are in the bin, not doing anything to defray farm debt downtown at the bank. So I always like to charge an interest cost for that value being in the bin.
Ed, you mentioned basis. What is basis, and why is it important for farmers as they set up their marketing plans?
Basis is the difference between cash and futures. So if you take your cash price and subtract the nearby futures price, or in this case, it'd be the cash price less that new crop futures price, that is the basis. And it's I shouldn't say very predictable, but it's much more predictable than price, especially for hedged bushels. We need to be very cognizant of what that basis is. You know, that local elevator, that local processor, that's the only lever they have to either encourage or discourage movement of the cash commodity. So if they want to encourage it, they're going to bid their basis up. If they want to discourage it, they're going to widen out their basis. And that's all about, if we look at a 5-year history, I looked at this for Central Iowa, basis has a much easier tendency to strengthen than price alone. Price is so unpredictable, but basis, especially into Christmas and after the first of the year, can be a really good pattern that we need to use for all of our bushels.
Why is it so important to have a marketing plan which sets deadlines based on seasonal price patterns? And why is market discipline so critical in today's markets?
It's so critical because we're at such tight margins. We've been at tight margins here for seems like 4 or 5 years, and with all the problems in 2020 with taking away, some of our trade, just COVID problems with ethanol. On average, there's not many opportunities if you look at it historical above the cost of ownership after we get past harvest. So you got to be ready with objectives, and those need to be both either a price or a basis, whatever you're kind of storing for, you need to have an objective there. And then time, because we move bushels seasonally, that impacts price. And we've often said that springtime frame is a good time to kind of set a deadline and get something moved, both new crop and on these stored bushels. It's just very important to have market discipline to take away some of that emotions and all those emotions that we really want the best price, but we've got to do it from a margin standpoint.
Ed, tell us more about the 2021 Iowa Commodity Challenge crop market simulation. How does it work, and how can farmers learn from it?
We've cooperated with using a tool at the University of Minnesota for quite a number of years now. So another simulation launched here in August, and we'll have a harvest price in October, and then we'll run that simulation all the way through June. So the Iowa Commodity Challenge really is a chance for Iowa farmers to use Iowa-based markets, real futures, real basis, real cash markets in central Iowa for a statewide simulation, and it adds cost of ownership. So it's got all the components, and all you need to do is go to iowafarmbureau.com/2020 crop marketing, and there will be an article that you see there. It has a link where you can get to the simulation. It also has a more detailed look at a recorded webcast that I did on all these topics and expanded them to talk about price trends and basis trends. It's really a fun way to learn with fictitious bushels. I tell folks when we do this, we're giving you 75,000 bushels of virtual corn, 25,000 bushel of virtual soybeans, and just really experiment with futures and options and learn with virtual dollars, so you're not really risking the real thing. And I really think it's a great planning tool too. If you want to plan it out, play it through the simulation, and hopefully it helps your real marketing, because we need to learn to use these risk management tools.
Okay, Ed, is there anything else as farmers are setting up their marketing plans for the coming harvest? Is there anything else they should be aware of?
Just be watching the carrying charge offered in the market. Make good choices on your risk management plan. And if you need to discuss it or have further education, that's my job with the Iowa Farm Bureau. So I would encourage people to go ahead and email me at ekorddick@ifbf.org, or go to that article, iowafarmbureau.com/2020 crop marketing.
As usual, good stuff from Ed. If that conversation got your wheels turning, head over to the webpage Ed referenced, iowafarmbureau.com/2020 crop marketing. We've also linked to it in the notes for this podcast episode, so you can find it there. Okay, who's ready to learn a little bit about a different kind of marketing? Rachel Cutrer is a Texas rancher who built her own successful farm-to-table brand and is now teaching other farmers how to do the same. In fact, Rachel is actually hosting a 2-part webinar series for us on August 25th and September 1st. It's called Farm to Table Bootcamp, and in this webinar series, she's going to dive deeper into the mechanics of building a farm-to-table brand from scratch, from naming and setting up your business to promotion and order fulfillment. We have a link to the Farm to Table Bootcamp in the notes for this episode, so be sure to check that out after you finish here. So, what are the important steps in building a successful farm-to-table brand? And what are some of the biggest challenges that aspiring brands can expect? Farm Bureau's Caitlin Lamb called Rachel to ask those questions and more.
Rachel, thanks so much for joining us today to talk about direct marketing opportunities. To start us off, tell us more about yourself and your family ranch in Texas.
Okay, so I really appreciate being here. I am a seventh generation Texas cattle rancher, and I live down about an hour south of Houston, so right along the Texas Gulf Coast. And if you've ever been down this way, you know two things that are really characteristic of where I live is it's very hot and very humid, and there are like mosquitoes the size of Suburbans here in this area, and so if you know that, it kind of makes sense of why we raise Brahman cattle. I know Brahman cattle are not as common at all in Iowa, but down here in the South where it's so hot, so humid, Brahmins are pretty much a mainstay. My ancestors were part of the people who brought Brahman to the United States back about over a century ago. And since then, a passion for ranching has really just been in my blood and something that I have enjoyed ever since I was a child through showing in 4-H and FFA. And then as I got into college, I knew that I wanted to stay involved in the industry, but the marketing of the cattle and the marketing of agriculture products is something that I really gravitated to. And I got a master's degree from Michigan State in ag communications. And, living up there in the Midwest combined with my Texas heritage, it just naturally created an opportunity for me to start the business of Ranch House Designs, which is an agency that really just serves farmers and ranchers all around the world. We started initially by working with purebred cattle ranchers, and then over the last 20 years, our business has really evolved, and we still serve those cattle ranchers, but we work with a lot of agriculture organizations, a lot of ag businesses, livestock nutrition companies, animal health companies, and even Western fashion brands and Western retail brands. And in the last year, really the farm to table segment has really been kind of the niche service area that we work with that has really taken off. So I've been fortunate through my own business of raising the cattle, and we also have a branded beef program, and then that combined with Ranch House Designs, I've really been able to kind of develop a pretty solid plan to help other producers build a farm to table brand because I've done it myself and I have that marketing background to do it.
Well, it sounds certainly like you keep pretty busy then with all of your things that you're working on.
Yeah.
So that's really cool with the Ranch House Designs. I did peek around your website, and yeah, your portfolio of clients is really impressive, from like commodity groups, your county fairs, your various breeders. And then, yeah, like what you said, what we're chatting about today, those farm to table businesses. And we're really excited to be partnering with you on an upcoming webinar series focused on that. When you think about all the components of building a farm to table brand, from thinking about like what products to sell, what processing facilities to use, the logistics of shipping and branding. You already touched on it, but can you tell us a little bit more about how that line of work came about? Were more and more people coming to you with that kind of interest?
I think a lot of people in agriculture, like me, they have those solid traditions of, being proud of their ranching heritage or their farming heritage, but they also are looking for something to diversify and maybe something to even make their own, where say their grandparents or their parents, maybe those generations have been the ones that were, acquiring land or, building infrastructure or things like that. And I find that a lot of the younger generation has really connected with the food movement, the buy local movement, the farm to fork movement. And so we really started noticing a trend in this probably within the last 2 to 3 years. But since COVID, especially in the pandemic, it's really escalated. And people definitely are looking for local sources for their food. And I find that a lot of farmers and ranchers enjoy this opportunity to feed their neighbors. For years, ranchers have said our job is to feed the world. And sometimes we think about the world, at a global level, and that's true, but really it's at that local level, and you're feeding your neighbors and you're feeding, your kids, classmates, families when you do this farm to table. And it's just a great feeling. And I think people have enjoyed it because it does give a little bit of diversification to their farm income, but it also gives them a really good sense of pride in knowing that their work is benefiting people that they know directly and their communities.
So I think that's a really great point, that connection with consumers. And it almost seems like your products can help make you more part of the community, even when you talk about like feeding your neighbors' kids and everything. So that's a really neat aspect of that. And you had brought up with COVID, we've seen this big uptick in consumer interest surrounding food, and people are paying attention to where their food comes. They have more questions. They're starting to realize it doesn't just come from the store. And with supply chain disruptions, we saw a lot of people wanting to buy food direct from farmers, I would say especially meat. And I think I was invited to like 3 or 4 different Facebook groups that were just all focused on lining up farmers with people looking to purchase whole hogs or quarter beefs or whatever it may be. In your area, have you also seen that kind of uptick with COVID, or how has the pandemic affected your farm to table brand?
It's been exactly the same as what you mentioned, Caitlin. And, initially, and when the pandemic hit in the spring, we saw just a mad rush of people wanting to buy our beef. And we sold out immediately. And then the problem became, how can we meet that demand by getting dates with processors and those sort of challenges? And now that we're further into the pandemic, that huge rush of, the frantic nature of, I want to stock my freezer, that has subsided a little bit. But what I found is that I have developed a new customer base of people that came to us, during the pandemic, and they tried our beef and they loved it. And now they're pretty solid regular customers, because once they've tried it, they're going to stick with buying local and buying farm to fork products.
Here in Iowa, we've definitely had that problem with the dates for processors, how like we're looking at next year for different spaces at lockers, and challenges abound. But with this renewed interest in buying direct from farmers, like I said, we are excited to have you on for the Farm to Table Boot Camp 2-part series later this month on August 25th and September 1st. And I don't want to share all the trade secrets prior to those webinars, but can you talk us through at a high level just the general steps to building a successful farm to table brand?
Sure. So, in any marketing of any product, you hear a lot of marketers talk about the 4 P's of marketing, which would be product, placement, price, and promotion. And it's essentially the same for marketing a farm to table, but I swap a couple of those around, and I say the 4 P's of marketing a farm to table is your product, your processor, your pricing, and your promotion. And so those are the main components we'll be talking about in this webinar series, and we'll really get into a lot of details within those. So how to raise and prepare your product for the farm to table, how to select a good processor, and build those partner relationships, different pricing options and different methods you can use to sell, whether it be, selling on the whole, the quarter, or even down to the individual cut, and then some different ways to promote your farm to table brand.
You break it down into those 4 things, but it's still obviously a lot to think about. There's lots of behind the scenes details, planning, lots of research to start out on the right foot. And in your experience setting up your own brand and helping other farmers and ranchers build up their brands, what have you seen as some of the biggest challenges? Or are they each, their own challenge?
Probably the biggest challenge that I've seen is building that team of people that you're going to work with in the farm to table brand. Because in working with farmers and ranchers for my entire career, I find that a lot of times maybe the hardest thing is just asking for help from a professional. And sometimes it's because naturally farmers and ranchers are so resilient, and they think that, they have to do everything in the business for themselves. And I really believe that if you're going to be successful in any business, you should focus on the one thing that you're really good at and the one thing that you really do best, but then bring in, some trusted people that can help you in the areas that maybe you don't necessarily know about. So in the farm to table business, obviously the farmer knows how to raise his product. He knows how to produce the best beef he possibly can, keep it healthy, grow it to the best weight and condition, and keep it in the best environment. And that's what the farmer does best. But the farmer may not know about, the regulations that you need to comply with if you're going to sell to the public, or he may not know about charging sales tax on food if that's applicable, or he may not know how to do social media. And so get help, and don't be afraid to ask for help from different people, different organizations, different regulating agencies, and even professionals who can help you with the big picture of start to finish marketing your brand.
And I think building a team, that's such a good point, because I think about our teams often on the farm consist of, if you're doing livestock, maybe it's your, nutritionist, or in crops, we have agronomists, or, no matter what your operation is, your lender or other people that you can bounce ideas off. So like you said, it's that reaching out, finding people who have that expertise who can help you make what you're doing even better. So that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
And then because of this renewed interest, it's possible many farmers may take advantage of these new opportunities. And we know, there's a lot of well-established brands already out there as well, which is awesome. But what is the best way when you're starting out here to differentiate your brand and connect with those new consumers?
So this is an area I learned once I got into it. I have a degree in animal science. I was actually on a meat judging team. And so initially, I was thinking the most important thing in raising a farm to table was going to be the quality grade, honestly. So I was thinking I've got to get my Brahman cattle to try to grade choice or prime if I want to be successful. And that is important, but I think consumers now just expect, quality grade as a basic expectation. And really, what differentiates and sells your product is your story and the connection with the people. So this is where each farmer can really shine. Talk about your family heritage in farming, if that's the case. Or if it's not the case, talk about how you're a first generation farmer and you just moved out of the city and you've started a farm to table business with your family. I mean, that's also a really great story. Talk about how you care for your animal. You can talk about the breed type of your animal and the characteristics that breed brings to the table, no pun intended, but it's really the story that sells. And people like doing business with people that they trust and, people that they respect. And so I always tell my clients, don't be afraid to tell your story and don't be afraid to show the real life of what goes on your farm, because we know that America's farmers and ranchers are doing a great job with their product, and show that to the public and let them see how much you care about what you do and how much pride you have in your business and your farm and your cattle, and it's the story that sells.
Yeah, I love that you bring that up, especially when you think about your own personal story when you said your ancestors were the first to bring Brahman cattle to the United States. Obviously, that's a pretty cool story to have. That's really unique. And it's so great when you do get to see that, what a day in the life of a farmer looks like if you don't have that idea. And like you talked about, the animal welfare and care that farmers give that some may not think about. And actually, that kind of brings me to my next question, because when I think about a lot of the local direct marketing brands in my area, the ones that come to mind to me that do a really good job, they have a lot of things in common. So I think about, like, first, they're like the nicest people ever, and everyone in the community seems to know them, and they're the first to show up if, someone needs assistance in the community. But it also seems like they understand their customers. They continue to offer like new and exciting products. And again, like you said, they communicate well. So that's me seeing it from the consumer side. But on the business side of things, of the most successful clients you have, what kind of qualities or even business tactics do you see that they share in common?
I would say it would be that they share a vision for innovation and being willing to try something new. And in agriculture, I mean, I'm very proud of my heritage, obviously, and I talk about that a lot. But I think sometimes we get wrapped up in honoring the past or just focusing on our family heritage and the way things that have always been done, that you may be a little hesitant to try something new or think outside of the box. And what I have found is there's a way to do both. To me, honoring the agriculture heritage is super important. But the way that I honor the past is by talking about the past and cherishing those memories and doing right by others in my business. But I still embrace innovation. And just because something has been done, for 100 years, that doesn't necessarily mean it's right. Maybe a farmer and rancher has always marketed his beef in a certain way. Maybe it's selling it at the auction barn or selling it direct to a feedlot or something like that. And so they might be hesitant to try a farm to table business, but give it a try. And what we do is we started small. We still probably market about 80% of our steers the same way we always have, but we've gradually tried a little bit more. And now we have 20% in our farm to table brand and 80%, in our traditional marketing. And just being willing to try something different and give it a try. There's a lot of room for new producers in the farm to table sector, and there's definitely a demand for consumers. So don't be scared to do it. Give it a try and see how it works. And if it doesn't work, you can always go back to your traditional marketing method, but you might be pleasantly surprised that it really does work, and it gives you a way to have a little bit of diversification in your income and connect with the community at the same time.
And that's really great advice, especially when you say that you can just start small. You don't have to put all your eggs in one basket. You don't have to totally transform the operation, which, some people want to go big or go home, but dipping your toe in the water is a good way to kind of see what's possible. And that brings up another question. What's something new that you guys have tried that has taken off that maybe you didn't think would?
Yeah, so when we got started doing farm to table, we started with 2 steers. And, normally we market about 100 steers, and we did 2 just to get started. And, so you can definitely start small. One thing that we have, and so initially we sold by the individual cut, but since COVID, we have now started offering beef bundles and beef boxes, and that has really been very well received. And so we still sell, someone can come buy a ribeye or a pound of ground beef from me if they want at that basic level. But each month we do a beef box, and it includes a variety of cuts. So let's say a roast, some ribs, 5 pounds of ground beef, 2 ribeyes, 2 New York strips, 2 Denver steaks. And we try to keep our boxes at less than $100. And those have been really popular because it gives people a chance to stock their freezer at the same time while getting a variety of beef choices that they can basically use for the whole month in their meal planning and feeding their family.
That's a really cool idea. And I've seen one farm around here in Iowa that had set up that kind of same model where they had a beef box. And I think you could do it like almost like a subscription where it can, just show up or whatever. And some you could customize or some were like, pre-done. So yeah, that's really cool. And with everything that we've talked about, obviously there's no silver bullet to success, and it takes some serious planning and hard work. But I do wonder, is there something that's like so little and easy to do that maybe is often overlooked, but it can make a big difference in a direct market business?
I would say probably don't overlook the power of your local contacts and word of mouth, especially in the initial stages of launching your business. So when we first launched our farm to table brand, 99% of my clients were people that were friends of mine on Facebook, and they saw that I had the local beef available. And now we're 2 years into it, and I have a pretty solid customer base that, spans from my hometown to Houston, which is about an hour away. But I do think that that initial Houston contact base actually came from word of mouth from my local friends. So, the small town country folk were telling their city friends, hey, we have this awesome beef in our hometown. You need to come out and try it. So I know a lot of times we want to think big and think at that grand level, but especially when you're getting started, probably your most untapped resource is going to be your local friends and word of mouth in your community just to help sell your product.
And that totally makes sense to me because you can set up, Facebook ads and all that. And obviously those are valuable tools. But when I think about the new products that I've tried, it's always been like a recommendation from a friend or a family member who raved about it. Those are people that you trust. That totally makes sense. Use your word of mouth contacts. Rachel, thank you so much for chatting with us today and sharing your expertise. We look forward to hearing from you again during our Farm to Table Bootcamp webinar series later this month.
Okay, thanks, Caitlin. I look forward to it too.
Well, there you have it. You've just taken the first step towards exploring a farm-to-table brand of your own. If you're ready to take the next step, be sure to check out our Farm to Table Bootcamp webinar series on August 25th and September 1st, featuring more insight from Rachel. The live webinars are free and open to everyone, and the recordings of those webinars will be available exclusively to our Farm Bureau members. Again, we've put the link to the Farm to Table Bootcamp series in the notes for this episode, so head there to check it out. That's all for this episode of the Spokesman Speaks podcast. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to catch our next regularly scheduled episode on September 7th. Until next time, I hope that every day presents you with an opportunity to learn something new and share your farm's unique story. Thanks for reading The Spokesman, and thanks for listening to The Spokesman Speaks.
Thank you for listening to The Spokesman Speaks, a podcast by Iowa Farm Bureau. Check out more podcasts and articles from The Spokesman at iowafarmbureau.com/spokesman. You can also find and subscribe to the Spokesman Speaks podcast in the Apple Podcasts app, Google Play, and other popular podcast apps. We appreciate your ratings and reviews and welcome your feedback at podcast@ifbf.org.